Hi, this is the Corkboard, a series where we compare the early drafts of screenplays with the final film to give us an insight into the storytelling process. In this video, I'd like to take a look at the rough draft of Return of the Jedi, back when it was known as Revenge of the Jedi. This draft is filled with fascinating differences that I could spend several videos going over. For example, in this draft, 2 Death Stars are actually orbiting Coruscant alongside Endor. However, in this video, I'd like to focus on the biggest difference, the character and story arc of Luke Skywalker. So let's dive straight into it. When it comes to Luke, the early scenes in the rough draft are similar to the final movie, with one major exception. There is no Leia. In this version, she's already on Endor with a group of rebels, trying to disable the shield generator. With that in mind, let's skip right to the Sarlacc pit. The first major difference is that Luke does not use his lightsaber here. In fact, he hasn't actually built one in this draft at all. Instead, he uses a blaster. This doesn't go over too well. One of Jabba's guards shoots the skiff, sending Han and Luke tumbling into the Sarlacc pit, where they spend the majority of the sequence until they're rescued by Lando. With Leia out of the picture, the role of blowing up the sail barge is given to the droids. They sneak into the engine room and overload the capacitors, causing the barge to explode. With Han now successfully rescued, the gang arrive at the hangar where the Falcon is parked. They're about to board when a group of Imperial officers ambush them. They knock out Han and capture Luke in an electrified cage. Luke doesn't do much because, again, no lightsaber. The Imperials get Luke aboard their ship and take off, hitting lightspeed before the Falcon can give chase. Han and the gang rendezvous with the rebel fleet. Han wants Leia's help in finding Luke, but he's informed that Leia is already on Endor. He leaves Lando to coordinate the attack on the Death Stars and takes Chewie and the droids to help Leia. Meanwhile, Luke sits in a small prison cell inside the shuttle. Luke begs Ben to help him face Vader and resist the dark side. A shimmering, translucent image of Yoda appears in the cell. Yoda explains that Ben can no longer help him. Ben's powers to stay in the Netherworld have been spent. He will soon be one with the Force, his identity lost forever. Only Luke can draw him back to the material world. Luke says he's not strong enough, Yoda has enough of Luke's whining, and contemplates turning to another for help. He reveals that Luke has a sister. Luke quickly guesses that it's Leia. Yoda thinks that if Luke fails to destroy Vader, she is their only hope. Luke is then brought to the Emperor's palace on Coruscant. In this version, Vader is on the Star Destroyer above the planet, supervising the construction of the 2 Death Stars. The Emperor asks Luke to join the dark side. Luke rejects, and the Emperor promptly sends him to the tomb dungeon under the castle. Up above, the rebels begin their assault on the Death Stars, while Han, Leia, and the Ewoks work to take out the shield generators. Luke wakes up and finds himself on a small island in the middle of a lava lake. He feels a presence behind him. Luke turns and sees Ben standing there. Not a Force ghost, but Obi-Wan in the flesh. Luke is confused, but Ben explains that he's here to help Luke fight the Emperor. Yoda seems to get a major case of FOMO and also appears briefly, ready to help Luke. Yeah, in this version, Yoda kind of appears and disappears whenever he feels like it. The Emperor arrives. He's surprised to see Ben, but is unfazed. He assures them that the boy will soon turn to the dark side. Yoda, Ben, and the Emperor trade insults for a while until Vader finally arrives. Luke reaches out and force pulls Vader's lightsaber into his hand, igniting it. The Emperor pulls a lightsaber out of his sleeve and throws it to Vader. Luke and Vader fight. Meanwhile, Ben and the Emperor continue to talk smack to each other from the sidelines. Luke delivers a crushing blow. Vader falls, his sword hand landing in the molten lava. The Emperor urges Luke to finish Vader. Luke considers this for a moment before lowering the weapon. He will not turn to the dark side. Luke extinguishes the lightsaber and tosses it to Ben. If Vader is to be destroyed, he must be the one to do it. The Emperor is not impressed. He blasts Force lightning at Ben. The bolts are reflected by the Force ghost of Yoda, who appears momentarily at the point of impact. The Emperor's bolts become more and more intense, knocking Ben unconscious and sending Luke to his knees. The Emperor advances on Luke, torturing him. He ponders over what Obi-Wan said about foreseeing his destruction at Luke's hands. Perhaps his vision was clouded by Yoda in the Netherworld. Perhaps there is another Skywalker. The Emperor realizes his destruction will come not at Luke's hand, but at his father's. He turns, but it's too late. Vader runs at the Emperor, performing the mother of all tackles and sending them both into the lava lake. Ben explains that it's in Yoda's hands now. Luke is relieved that his father has turned back to the light side. Above them, the pair of Death Stars are blown up by the rebel fleet. The rough draft also ends with a celebration on Endor. Yoda appears with good news. He was able to prevent Vader from becoming one with the Force. Anakin Skywalker then appears in the flesh. The movie ends with Yoda watching the main gang, including Ben and Anakin, partying with the Ewoks. Yoda lets out a sigh and the credits roll. So what's the biggest difference here? Luke's absent lightsaber, his capture at the hands of the Empire, Ben and Yoda joining him for the final duel? All of these elements come together to create the key difference. The Luke in the rough draft is a passive protagonist. The Luke in the final movie is active. This is the case in almost every scene. Let's compare. Sail barge escape. Luke is the driving force behind the entire attack. With his lightsaber in hand, he jumps on the barge, takes out the guards, picks up Leia, and blows up the entire thing. And now here's a passage from the rough draft. Han struggles to climb out of the pit, but only slides further down towards the fearsome sloth. He slides past Luke, who is lying very still, spread eagle in the sand, facing the hole at the bottom. Next, Luke chooses to go to Yoda to complete the training and gets rejected. He doesn't want to fight Vader because there's good in him. He can't kill his own father. Luke gets captured and begs Yoda for help because he's not strong enough. Luke returns to the Rebel fleet and volunteers to help his friends with an incredibly dangerous mission that will take them right into the heart of the enemy forces. Luke is still sitting in the shuttle. Luke gives chase and takes out the stormtroopers before going to search for Leia in the forest. He is captured by the Ewoks, but even here Luke is active, trying to warn Chewie of the traps set by the Ewoks, preventing Han from using violence and using his Jedi powers to free his friends. Yeah. Luke makes the choice to confront Vader. Luke is unwillingly brought to the Emperor's homeworld on Coruscant. Luke confronts Vader and tries to bring him back to the light. The Emperor asks Luke to join him. Luke refuses before being thrown into the tomb. Vader brings Luke to the Emperor, who tempts Luke into giving into his anger. It's important to know that this happens across 4 scenes. Vader is present, but he's little more than part of the set. The dialogue is exclusively between the Emperor and Luke. This is the battle before the battle, as the hero and villain engage in a duel of ideologies. Luke wakes up and finds that Ben and Yoda have appeared to help him fight the Sith. The 2 Jedi Masters are the ones doing the verbal sparring with the Emperor when he finally arrives. Here, both Luke and Vader are part of the set. Luke gives in to his anger and attacks the Emperor, engaging Vader in combat. After a lengthy duel, Luke is pushed over the edge when Vader threatens to turn Leia to the dark side. Luke defeats Vader and readies to strike the final blow, spurred on by the Emperor. Luke has a moment of clarity and decides to reject the dark side. He throws his lightsaber away. The Emperor tortures Luke, which spurs Vader to save his son and kill the Emperor. Vader is redeemed by the love of his son. Luke attacks Vader, father and son battle while the old Jedi and Sith continue to commentate. Just like in the final movie, Luke defeats Vader and readies to strike the final blow, spurred on by the Emperor. Luke has a moment of clarity and decides to reject the dark side, but in the ultimate passive move, he throws the lightsaber to Ben, telling him, if he is to be destroyed, you must do it. The Emperor then force lightnings both Luke and Ben until Vader decides to tackle the Emperor into the lava. For Vader, there is no redemption at the hands of his son. Instead, it's in Yoda's hands now. But why is having an active protagonist such a big deal? Christopher Vogler sums it up best in his book, The Writer's Journey. The hero is usually the most active person in the script. A frequent flaw in screenplays is that the hero is fairly active throughout the story, but at the most critical moment becomes passive and is rescued by the timely arrival of some outside force. At this moment, above all, a hero should be fully active, in control of his own fate. The hero should perform the decisive action of the story, the action that requires taking the most risk and responsibility. Look, a passive protagonist can be fine for a drama, but in an epic adventure like Star Wars, the protagonist drives the story forward with their actions. Just imagine if Batman stood there and let Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent figure out how to stop the Joker. Or if Harry just let all of his friends take on Voldemort's forces during the Battle of Hogwarts while he munched on some Bertie Bott's. It's also important to note that by removing the help in the form of Ben and Yoda, the writer forces Luke to be active and make tough decisions. Lucas addresses this point in the annotated screenplays for Return of the Jedi. Even though at some point Yoda and Ben interfered, I eventually decided that they shouldn't connect physically with what Luke was doing. I felt that one of the major issues in the third film is that Luke is finally his own man and has to fight Vader and the Emperor by himself. If you get a sense that Yoda and Ben are there to help him or somehow influence him, it diminishes the power of the scene. I do want to point out it's clear that the rough draft was a work in progress. George Lucas is known for laying down broad strokes first. George knew Lawrence Kasdan was going to rewrite the movie. In fact, both George and Kasdan had extensive meetings on the changes and the direction of the plot. The rough draft should not be seen or critiqued as a standalone piece of work, rather used as an example of how much stronger a story can be when the main character is the driving force of action. If you're interested in learning more about the different iterations of the Star Wars scripts, I recommend picking up the annotated screenplays. The book is chock full of amazing insights about the storytelling process behind the original Star Wars trilogy. Thanks for watching.